Morning, Trainiacs. We have a very fun day planned. So over the past couple of years, I've kind of become the Zone 2 guy, the easy training guy. Sort of funny that a couple of times when I've dropped some fast races, would have been particularly after Challenge Daytona, where I went 1:05:37, I think. And the swim was a 850 meter swim. And after Challenge Roth last year, there were a few people that were like, geez, man, really thanks, Gracie, didn't expect you to put out a time like that. Like, I follow you on Strava and all your training is so slow. I didn't think you had that kind of speed. And I'm like, yeah, not all your training has to be fast. Actually, the vast majority of it needs to be pretty slow. Thanks. And even on Team Trainiac, vast majority of the training is very slow, easy, ramps up a fair bit in race season, but you got to get that base training in. It's just, like, it's science. There's really no way around it. But the hard part about it is that when people first start, it's very, very difficult, and we get a lot of questions that are like, no, this can't be right. In a lot of cases, it is right. But if you want to find out if it's totally right, that's what we're doing today. What we've got here is everything we need to do a little bit of testing to really dial in what the zones are for a friend who we train with. We've got the VO2 Master VO2 mask to assess his top end, where his top end is. We've got a Edge lactate meter. So this is going to figure out his blood lactate levels. And then we have a bunch of things to clean up. We're going to be putting him on a bike. We're going to take him through a ramp test. Throughout, we're going to be taking all these measurements of blood lactate, of his heart rate, of his VO2, and we're going to figure out the exact zones of where he's at, because he's actually had some troubles with really high heart rates, and he's wondering, like, what is his low base training zone? So this is how we do it. Gosh, it's going to be nice to be the inflictor of pain for a change. Been working on my Spanish with Duolingo. I almost know the difference between an apple and an orange. How you feeling? Scared? No? No? That's the spirit. I'm sure it'll be fine. Turn up something.
That needs to be scrubbed down.
How'd that feel?
Good.
Okay, so we got some data here. And I fully recognize that I am not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a researcher. I've just been through this test a few times. I've witnessed it happen. It's not rocket science, and if you have the desire to really start dialing in your zones, these are some tools that you can get. You can go online, you can buy the VO2 Master, you can buy the Edge lactate meter is what we used, and start dialing in what your zones actually are. So let's look at Scott here. This sheet that you're seeing, you might have got, if you go to triathlontaren.com/HR training, you can get this calculator that you punch in your age, you answer some yes/no questions, you figure out your max heart rate, and then you add in your FTP and you get your zones here. But these are a little bit arbitrary. They're one step better than just a percentage of your 220 minus your age or 180 minus your age. And what that gives us here for Scott's expected zone is that the top of his zone 2 would be 128. Is that right? Well, we'll see. So we'll look at the data here, and the lactate meter, not great. I use the Edge lactate analyzer, which I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it's something, because everything in red here we've got to basically throw away. I think that there's 2 measurements that are somewhat accurate, being at 125 watts and 215 watts. For context, Scott is 52 years old and his FTP is 215. What we can look at is a few things here. We can use this test to say, all right, what was his max heart rate? What did it max out at? 169 was what I saw. I assume that when you do a max heart rate test on the bike, you can go about 2% higher than that. And if you take 79% of that number, that's roughly a max heart rate zone 2 that you can use. So we've got the max heart rate of 169. We add that by about 2.5% to that. And then 79% of that is roughly 136. Also, you can do a top of your zone 2 FTP. And for that, what we're looking at is over here in the calculator, we would take his FTP of 215, and about 76% of that is the estimation of the top of the zone 2, 163 watts. Now we can cross-reference that, and where was he at that 163-ish watts? Well, he was at a heart rate of about 135. So getting pretty close to say that at 163, his max heart rate should be around 136. Yeah, that works out. But physiologically, do we know that that's the top of his zone 2? Ideally, what you want is if you've got an accurate lactate meter, I might be trying something different than this, you want to test your lactate, and when it crosses 2.0, that's sort of the barrier between your below zone 2 and above zone 2. So we can tell that I think we've got the one result here that is right around there, and it would have climbed from that. So yeah, getting up to that 135 beats a minute seems about right. What we also had on was the VO2 master mask, and that's where I think we can actually get some more accurate data. And this is the test result of the VO2. And what we're looking at is we're looking at a spike. When does he start using a significantly more amount of energy? And where we see that is at the 12-minute mark. That's where things tend to basically tick up. Here the VO2 max, the amount of oxygen that he's using, is increasing, and it ticks up at that 12-minute mark. And we go back over here, and where is he at the 12 minutes? He is roughly at because we're in 4-minute intervals, that 155 watts, 135 heart rate. So everything is pointing to, yeah, he does not have a significantly different zone 2 than what we'd expecting. If you go with the MAF test, if you go with a max heart rate, if you look at the VO2 data, if you look at his FTP data, everything is pointing towards he is just like most people. So what does that tell us about him and you? If you are saying I just can't lower my heart rate, something is wrong. In a lot of cases, not a lot is wrong. You just have to adjust your training. So in Scott's case, what I would tell him, and I'm going to tell him, is the same thing that I told a guy named Robin who's on Team Trainiac. What he was saying is, you know what, at my top of zone 2 effort level, for my heart rate, my watts are really low, and all the friends that I normally ride with, they seem to be going along okay, and it doesn't feel like I'm working any harder, but here you are telling me to hold back. So in Robin's case, what happened was there was somebody that he was training with a lot, and because Robin had to stay at his zone 2 effort levels for the long rides, he would end up getting dropped. Fast forward to a year after that, and he was all of a sudden kind of getting close. And then this year, now his watts at his zone 2 effort level are so high that he is dropping the training partner that he had. So the training partner got quicker right away, but then leveled out because he wasn't doing that zone 2. He was pushing harder. He was letting his heart rate climb. Whereas Robin just year after year improved over and over. And he's still just at the start of this, 2 years of solid training, and he's just at an effort level now that has eclipsed his original training partner. And I asked Scott, like, what does a typical training week look like for you? And he said, well, it's kind of like our moderate ride. I go rides with the guys, and sometimes it's hard, and sometimes I do a spin session, sometimes I'll load up a trainer road workout with a lot of sweet spot work. And what I'm seeing from him is exactly what I see from most people, that the easy stuff is not easy enough, the hard stuff is not hard enough. So what happens with him is his heart rate just instantly climbs into that moderate intensity training, and he doesn't actually adapt to it because it's too hard to adapt in an easy sense, and it's not hard enough to go hard enough to go faster. So what I'm going to advise him to do is 135 beats a minute. And this isn't like an exact science. If you need it exactly down to the heartbeat, you need to go into a lab and you need to constantly be testing this because it changes literally day to day and week to week. It's not like bang on exact no matter how fancy your testing is. So in this case, everything points to around 135 beats a minute being the top end of his zone 2. And I'd advise him that over the course of a year that he should do 80% of his training under that intensity. And sure, he's probably going to feel fairly slow in year 1, but year 2, he's going to increase that over and over and over. And then 20% of his training in a year is going to be at a very high intensity. We're talking 10% or more above his FTP, and do intervals at that intensity level that last somewhere between 30 seconds and 6 minutes. That's your sweet spot for increasing the speed. And this stuff 100% works. This is exactly what I do. And I actually just had one of those Instagram pop-ups. It was like 2 years ago on this day you did this. And it was a bike ride that was a zone 2 bike ride where I only held 134 watts. Today, most of my zone 2 bike rides would be at around 170 to 180 watts. So this is just what happens. It's really hard at the start to do zone 2 training, and you might be riding with your pals and like, nope, Taren's calculations are off. No, all the calculations out there are off. I am the precious flower. I am different. All of these statistics completely wrong, not going to work for me. We just proved that for a guy that has exactly that same challenge where he's got a high heart rate for most of his workouts and he's got to bring it down, needs to take his medicine and do a lot of low heart rate training to end up getting there, because everything says he's training at a heart rate that's too high. Sorry, Scott, I know you're probably watching this. Thanks for suffering. That was really good. I poked you with a needle a lot. If you found this interesting, Trainiacs, and you want to see another video, you can check this one over here. And if you aren't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button below. Later.